So the rest of your notes are just going to be this next page, which goes over how to use a nutrition label to answer different questions about rates and ratios and proportions. So it says, consider the following nutrition facts for Junior Mints candies. Use the information on the label to answer the questions, including units in your work and final answers. So that is something that you'll want to make sure that you do, is to include units in your work and the final answers. Keep in mind that nutrition labels tend to list approximate values, so they are just approximate, and percents are usually rounded to whole numbers, so it's not going to be exact. Okay, the first thing I want us to do is to just look at all the information on the nutrition label. So it says that a serving size is 40 grams. So the entire serving size is 40 grams. In that, we have 170 calories, and we know that 30 of those calories come from fat. If we look below, on the right side, all of these are the percent of the daily value, so looking at recommendations. Over here are what are in the contents of the candy. So for total fat, we've got 3 grams. Then we have the amount of that fat that's saturated, which is 2.5 grams. We have 0 grams of trans fat, no cholesterol. There's 30 milligrams of sodium. And then we have our total carbohydrates as 35 grams, and then it breaks those down into different types. We've got fiber as 1 gram and sugars as 32 grams, and the last one that we have is protein, which is 1 gram. It then looks at vitamins and minerals, and down at the bottom you have this, which is exactly what you saw on your note packet when it looked at the recommendations. Down at the bottom, all the way at the bottom, it has one last thing, and it's a little bit hard to see on your guys' note packet, but it has fat, so it's the amount of calories per gram. And for fat, that's 9. For carbohydrates, it is 4. And for protein, it is 4 calories per gram. So that is a lot of information on one label, and we're going to use some of it to help us answer the questions. Okay, starting with number 1, it says what percent of the calories, so we're looking at the calories, in Junior Mints is from fat. So we want to think of this as the number of fat calories out of the total calories. So if we look at our label, we don't want the amount of fat in grams, we want the amount of fat in calories. So if we look right here, it tells us that there are 30 calories from fat. So that's going to go on the top. And on the bottom, we want the total calories. And so I'm going to put 170 calories on the bottom. It wants us to give our answer as a percent. And you can even look at this tip. It says, remember that to convert a fraction to a percent, divide the top by the bottom, and then multiply the result by 100. And that's the same as moving the decimal 2 places to the right. So you're just going to do 30 divided by 170 and just type that in your calculator. And we get 0.1764. And let's just round this to the closest percent. So to change it to a percent, multiply by 100, so we get 17.64. So we can say about 18%. Because we're changing it to a percent, you do not need to label that one. For number 2, it says this package of Junior Mints accounts for 5% of a person's daily intake of fat for a 2,000 calorie diet. We want to think about how that was calculated. So if we look down at the bottom, for a 2,000 calorie diet, we've got 65 grams of fat. So this is the total grams of fat, and we want the fat in grams in this item, so in the Junior Mints. So if we look over here, we can see that it is 3 grams of fat, and the total amount of fat suggested is 65 grams, and that is for a 2,000 calorie diet. So if we take and divide 3 divided by 65, we get 0.04615, multiply it by 100 to get it as a percent, so that's 4.6, which is about 5%. So we can see that's how they got 5%. Okay, the next one that we're going to look at is number 3. It says, what percent of a person's daily allowance of carbohydrates does she consume if she eats this whole package of Junior Mints? Find the answer on the label and show how to calculate it, assuming it's a 2,000 calorie diet. So we want to look at again, we're going to compare it from just what's in here to what's overall. So we want and this time it is carbohydrates. So carbohydrates in grams for Junior Mints, and then we want the total grams of carbs for a 2,000 calorie diet. So let's look along the bottom again, and this has 300 grams for a 2,000 calorie diet. In this, if we look at our total carbohydrates, it has 35 grams. And on the right side, it shows that it will be 12%. So on the right side, it shows that out of the percent daily value, it is 12%. So we want our answer right here, 35 divided by 300, to match that. And so if we divide, we get 0.116 repeating. Multiply it by 100, that would be 11.6, which is about 12%. So that matches. For number 4, it says find the number of calories per piece of Junior Mint candy if there are 16 pieces in a serving. Okay, so what we want to do here is we want to take the total calories and divide it by the number of pieces. Because when it says something like this, it wants to know the number of calories per piece. So this is calories per piece. So that's why I put the total calories on the top and the number of pieces on the bottom. So looking at the nutrition label, it says there are 170 calories in the entire thing. So I have 170 calories, and it says there are 16 pieces. So I'm going to go ahead, because I want to get it to be just a rate, I want it to be just for one piece, I'm just going to divide. So I'm going to take 170 divided by 16, and so I get 10.625. So I can round that to about 11 and use that rate right there. So that would be 11 calories per piece. For number 5, Assume that a person has a 2,500 calorie diet. What percent of his daily allowance of carbohydrates does he consume if he eats the whole package of Junior Mints? So this one is going to be very similar to number 3, but instead of using the total amount of calories for a 2,000 calorie diet, we're now going to be using the amount for 2,500. So if we look right there, we can see that would be 375 grams of carbohydrates. So go ahead and divide, and we get 0.093 repeating. Change it to a percent by multiplying by 100. So that would be approximately, and it says round to the nearest whole percent, so just a whole number. So that's about 9%. For number 6, how many calories are there per gram of Junior Mints? So calories per gram. So that tells us we're going to put calories on the top and the grams on the bottom. And we're looking at the entire serving. So if I go to the top here, I've got 170 calories. And if I go above that, something that we probably didn't remember, but it says it's 40 grams. So I'm going to have 170 calories per 40 grams. So I'm going to divide, and I get 4.25. And that's about 4. So we can say there's about 4 calories per gram. And if you wanted to write it as this, you could do that as well. And number 7, it says the label says there are 30 calories from fat. How is this number calculated? So this one is probably the trickiest problem out of all because it's really difficult to kind of find the information for this one. So if we've got 3 grams of fat, we know that there are 3 grams of fat. How do we go from grams to calories? Well, that's the one thing that was really hard to see. It says that fat grams are 9 calories each. So we also know that each gram of fat is about 9 calories. So if we use those two pieces of information, that there are 3 grams of fat in that serving and that each gram has 9 calories, I'm just going to multiply and I get 27 calories. And that's how they calculated it. And when they said 30 calories, that's pretty close. So we can say close. Okay, for the rest of this section, you guys will have your homework on my math lab. Please remember to ask any questions that you guys have at all. I am happy to help. When you ask questions, I can write out answers. I can create a short video to show you. I can even meet via Zoom with you guys, so I am more than happy to do that. For your practice on your own, and also I know that I had the next page, page 26, labeled as your notes. Those problems were actually in our previous pages. They just looked a little bit different. For your practice, you have this as starting on page 27. You have those different questions. And then you have on page 30 some other ones that are similar to what you'll see on the homework, which should help. And then finally, I've got some practice problems for the 1.2 to 1.4 quiz, and that is on page 34. So I've got a lot of practice on here that is optional. And then next week, we will start looking at section 5 after that. So please remember, if you guys have questions, just to reach out. I am more than happy to help.